Hi, my name is Dinely Huerta, and I'll be talking about the reproductive system and organs found in the phylum pictured on this PowerPoint. So first off, we're going to discuss the types of reproduction that each of these phylums do. So first off, we have our sea star or Echinodermata, and they perform reproduction both asexually and sexually. So when going sexually to reproduce, they typically release their sex cells into the water, and typically these are in big groups of sea stars so that I guess everyone has a chance of gathering and reproducing more successfully with all the sperm and eggs that are basically thrown out into the water. And so they have these reproductive organs called gonads, which I believe they're found in each arm or just one of the arms, so these gonads fill with the sperms or the egg, and they basically just reproduce from there. Now, if they were to go in and reproduce asexually, this would typically happen through fission. And so what happens is for instance, if a sea star were to lose an arm, what happens is that once it breaks off, that each portion will regenerate itself, obviously, but that portion that had fallen off will then go on and basically become a new sea star by itself. And so all sea stars can regenerate their own limbs, but very few are allowed to reproduce this way. So for instance, a sea star that reproduces this way is called a Cosinisteris acutispina. So this is typically their way of reproducing, but majority of sea stars or Echinodermata reproduce sexually. Next, we have the roundworms, and so they all reproduce sexually. And so their organs consist of, in males, they have testes, a seminal vesicle, a vas deferens, and a cloaca. And in females, their reproductive organs consist of ovaries, a uteri, vagina, and genital pore. And so their process of reproduction happens where, of course, like I said, it happens sexually. So the male uses a slender part, and this is called the spicule. And so this is used to open the female genital pores. And so from there on, like I said, the spicula aids the male in transferring their sperm into the female, which then migrates toward the egg using its amoeba-like movements, because the sperm, it lacks flagella like most other cells, for instance, human sperm cells do. And so once the egg is then fertilized, the female will secrete her eggs via bowel movements. That egg will then become larva, and then a few weeks later, we would have a fully grown roundworm, and from there on, the cycle will begin all over again. And lastly, we have the mussel, which this type of phyla will reproduce. It's in a way similar with what sea stars do, but because the mussels, they are what we call hermaphrodites, they contain both female and male reproductive organs, so they're allowed to basically reproduce each one on their own the same way. So what will first happen is they'll spawn the same way that sea stars do, and so they'll release their sperm into the water. Their sperm is then drawn inside to the shells, either male or female. The eggs then become fertilized, and then they will become larvae. And from there, whoever holds the egg, the fertilized egg, or the larvae, will then be stored into their gills for some time. And so they typically wait for them to mature before they expel them into the water, where once they expel the matured larvae into the water, the matured larvae will then attach to a parasite, and it typically will attach to either the gills or the fins of a fish. So it wants to be attached to a host, where from then being attached to that host, they'll stay attached for typically a few weeks, even months if they need to, and they'll just wait until they develop and metamorph into a stronger adult larvae. And so they develop their adult organs and their structures. And so once they've developed completely and they have everything they need and they're ready to basically just hop off of that fish, they will. And so from then they'll drop to the bottom of the water, and they'll basically just stay there and redo the whole process all over again. So a lot of this it sounds very similar, but they all do have very different ways. For instance, their reproductive organs, the way they process their sperms and eggs, how long it takes. In roundworms, I didn't go into full detail, but it typically takes a few weeks. It doesn't say it. It generally depends on that specific larvae and the type of species. And so a lot goes into the whole reproductive systems and what generally keeps it going. So yeah, thank you very much for listening, and I hope I went into great detail. Thank you.